From Barry Bonds' affair with adult star Devon Shire that nearly wrecked his marriage to Wilson Contreras, getting caught in a star's DMs, MLB players have had their fair share of off-field scandals. In this video, we're taking a closer look at MLB players who got involved with adult film stars, and some of the names will genuinely surprise you. Barry Bonds. Back in the 90s, Barry Bonds wasn't just making headlines for his record-breaking performances, he was also making waves off the field with his alleged relationship with adult film star Devon Shire. During the early days of Barry Bonds' career, way before he shattered the home run record, before all the controversy and steroid rumors, and before he became one of the most polarizing figures in baseball history, Barry allegedly got involved with an adult film star by the name of Devon Shire. Yeah, not something you'd expect to read in the box scores. According to her, this wasn't just a fling either. Devon claimed that Barry actually got her pregnant during the summer of 1994. Now, of course, nobody knows for sure what happened behind closed doors. Barry's camp never really addressed it publicly, and honestly, this story kind of faded into the background as his career took off. But Devon didn't exactly stay quiet about it. She went on record, telling anyone who'd listen that she had his child, and even hinted that this relationship played a role in his personal life falling apart, because less than a year after this alleged pregnancy, Barry and his wife at the time, Susan Sun Bonds, filed for divorce because he became aggressive toward her. Coincidence? Maybe. But a lot of people, especially the media, started connecting the dots. And if we're being honest, it's not hard to see why. You're Barry Bonds, rising MLB star, and suddenly there's a public claim from a well-known adult actress that she's pregnant with your kid. That's not the kind of thing that just slides under the radar. If you thought Barry Bonds was the only MLB player caught up in an adult film star scandal, think again, because the league is not off the hook just yet. Let's fast forward a couple decades and take a look at a more recent scandal involving none other than Darvish. Darvish's story in particular has just the right amount of internet messiness to keep your mouths open and your eyebrows raised. So, Darvish, the star pitcher for the San Diego Padres, known for his sharp slider and calm demeanor, was suddenly trending for a reason that had nothing to do with baseball. It all started on X, formerly known as Twitter, where Darvish had a public interaction with Japanese adult film star Kara Asuka. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's social media, and its point is kinda for interaction, right? Well, you're right, except this one wasn't just a random like or a casual follow. People started noticing some flirty vibes between the two, and before you knew it, fans were speculating left and right. Now, to be fair, there's no hard confirmation that anything actually happened between them. But in stories like this, sometimes it's not about what's said, it's about what isn't. When Asuka was asked point blank if she and Darvish had hooked up, she didn't deny it with a simple no. Instead, she gave us a cryptic, "What can I say?" And that is not a denial. That's just the kind of answer that makes the rumor mill go full throttle. And it did, but it didn't stop there. When someone else asked if she'd like to hook up with him, hypothetically, she laughed and told them there wasn't a chance while literally giggling. That's the kind of no that doesn't close the door, but just leaves it cracked open enough to make you wonder. Now, Darvish has always kept things tight-lipped off the field. He's not one to air out his personal life. So, of course, he didn't respond, didn't acknowledge it, didn't even blink publicly. Which, honestly, just added to the mystery, because silence sometimes speaks louder than any press statement. Not every wild MLB story, however, involves players directly. Sometimes it's the people behind the scenes that are causing all the drama, and in the next case, we have another MLB player who clearly had a type and wasn't ashamed to show it. Mike Napoli. Mike Napoli, former MLB slugger and certified fan favorite, made headlines because he was spotted hanging out with adult film star Rachel Starr. Yeah, that Rachel Starr. She even posted about going to a Red Sox-Giants game as Napoli's guest, calling him one of her favorite friends to hang out with. Naturally, that sent the internet into meltdown mode. People started asking, are they dating, hooking up, just hanging out? Because if there's anything the internet loves more than baseball, it's mixing it with porn, and a power-hitting first baseman and a famous adult star into the same headline is a content goldmine. SEO heaven. Even Nationals manager Davey Johnson jumped into the circus, joking that none of his players were dating stars because they can't score. But this is Mike Napoli we're talking about. Like, if you know anything about the guy, this didn't even feel surprising. Napoli always had that vibe. He was a party guy, a dude who would shotgun beers with the fans if he wasn't in uniform. If you had to draft a list of MLB players most likely to link up with a star, his name is probably going in the top 3, maybe number 1. It's not even slander, it just tracks. And what makes it even funnier is how loved Napoli was, especially in Texas. He only played 2 years with the Rangers, but fans acted like he was born in Arlington. He got traded from Toronto after the Angels dumped him in the Vernon Wells trade, one of the worst deals ever, by the way, and immediately exploded in Texas. He mashed, he hit bombs, he destroyed the Angels every time he faced them, which made fans love him even more. There were Napoli chants every time he came to the plate. He was that dude, even when he hit just .220 27 the next year, no one cared. Fans were still all in on him. CJ Wilson literally leaked his phone number after signing with the Angels, trying to stir something up, and it backfired. Rangers fans rallied behind Napoli even harder, so when news broke that he was hanging out with Rachel Starr years later in Boston, it just felt right. Like, of course it's Napoli, of course it's him. But then, the only disappointing part is that this didn't happen while he was still in Texas. Because if there's one team that knows drama, chaos, and complete randomness, it's the Texas Rangers. Bar fights, bankruptcy, players punching photographers. This would have fit perfectly. Derek Bell and Scott Sanders. Two San Diego Padres players, Derek Bell and Scott Sanders, got arrested in New York for trying to hire prostitutes. It happened on a Tuesday around 2 a.m. Pitcher Scott Sanders and outfielder Derek Bell were on a street corner in Manhattan. They didn't know it, but the women they were talking to were actually undercover police officers. Cops were running a sting operation to catch people trying to buy and Sanders and Bell got caught. They were arrested and charged with a misdemeanor for soliciting a prostitute. That means they were accused of trying to pay someone for sex. What makes it even crazier is that this happened less than a day before they were supposed to play a game against the Mets at Shea Stadium. Later that same day, both players went to court and they pleaded not guilty. The court then offered them a deal: plead guilty to a smaller charge, do 1 day of community service, attend a health class, and pay a $45 fine, but they said no. They were later released without having to pay bail, but were told to come back to court on a later date. The team didn't say much, but the story made headlines. Yeah, we know it's not exactly far-fetched for MLB players to sleep with sex workers. That's the whole point of this video after all. But for these two, whether or not they were guilty, the damage to their reputation was already done. And once a story like this hits the news, it follows you for a long time. Next up, we have Alex Rodriguez. Alex Rodriguez is one of the most talented baseball players of all time, but for every home run and MVP award, there's always been a cloud of drama following him. PEDs, suspensions, drama with teammates, and believe it or not, A-Rod's name has been linked to sex work more than once. Back in 2009, the Daily News reported that he was dating Kristen Davis, better known as the Manhattan Madam. She ran a high-end prostitution ring, which wasn't for anything other than sex, as she insinuated when she said she didn't keep an apartment for men to have dinners with her girls.
The guys aren't paying for dinners.
No, and you don't keep an apartment for a guy to meet a girl in for dinner.
Kristen supposedly counted A-Rod as both a client and a boyfriend. That was the first time his name came up in this world, but not the last. In 2013, writer Michael Gross released a book that went even deeper. According to the book, A-Rod was allegedly hiring escorts twice a week, and not just one at a time, he'd reportedly hire them in pairs. This supposedly went on for years and became part of the larger image people had of him: rich, arrogant, addicted to attention, and always denying everything. Just like he did with steroids, A-Rod denied every accusation. No matter what was said, he stuck to the same not true line. But as more stories piled up, it got harder and harder to separate fact from reputation. And even though he has cleaned up his image a bit in retirement, the stories are still out there. Whether you believe them or not, they're part of the long, messy legacy of Alex Rodriguez. If you think this is the height of it all, wait till you hear about the next person on our list: Dave Stewart. Dave Stewart. Dave Stewart was a solid pitcher in his day. He bagged no-hitter, All-Star, 3 World Series rings, and even a Roberto Clemente Award for representing the game the right way. After he retired, he stayed in the sport and became a successful agent, then eventually the general manager of the Arizona Diamondbacks. But before all of that, Stewart made headlines for something very different. In 1985, he was arrested in Los Angeles for soliciting a prostitute, but maybe Dave's story would have been better off if it was just any prostitute. This one happened to be a transvestite. According to reports, Stewart didn't realize the person he picked up was a man until the police told him after the arrest. The whole thing happened in LA's Skid Row area in the middle of the night, in his car, while the act was already in progress. It was humiliating. It made the papers and followed him for years. Now, whether or not he knew what he was getting into, the headlines didn't care. MLB star caught with transvestite prostitute was all anyone needed to read, and it stuck. But credit where it's due, Stewart didn't let that be the end of his story. He didn't hide from it. He owned up to it, and he kept moving forward. Of course, not every story involved deceit and denial. Some were just cases of plain self-destruction, like what happened with Daryl Strawberry. Daryl Strawberry. By 1999, Daryl Strawberry had already been through a lot. He'd battled drug addiction for years, survived colon cancer, and somehow still managed to put together a strong season just the year before. It looked like he was ready for a solid comeback. But just before the new season started, Strawberry was arrested in Tampa, Florida, for offering $50 to a woman for sex. athletes. Problem was that the woman was actually an undercover cop. Yeah, it was a sting, another scandal, and once again, Strawberry's name was back in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. The sad part was that this kind of thing had become expected from him. Anytime people talked about athletes getting caught up in their own bad decisions, Daryl Strawberry's name always came up. At some point, he couldn't hide his addiction anymore and spoke about it publicly.
There are all kinds of very honest revelations that you share. One of them, which really caught me off guard, was an admission that you actually, in the middle of games, were so addicted to sex that you would actually go out and have sex in between innings.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy, you know. It was
pretty crazy.
But even with all the drug problems, sex addiction, and the arrests, the guy still had an incredible career. He was an 8-time All-Star. He had a swing that could change games. If anything, his story shows how insanely talented he was even while battling demons off the field. And while Strawberry's troubles became a kind of tragic pattern for some players, one bad decision was all it took to derail everything. Just ask Juny Heath. Juny Heath. Juny Heath wasn't a household name, but he was on the path. By 24, he was already a pitcher in the Braves system, working his way up the minor league ladder, carrying the dreams that every young ballplayer knows by heart. The dream of hearing your name called up to the majors, of stepping onto that pristine mound at Truist Park, of proving you belonged among baseball's elite. Heath had the talent, the work ethic, and most importantly, the opportunity. In a sport where thousands of young men compete for just a few hundred roster spots, he had made it further than most ever would. But then, he made one decision that changed everything. In Florida, during what should have been another routine off-season, police were running a Craigslist sting operation. They posed as women offering sex for money, casting a wide net to catch unsuspecting men. Heath, perhaps lonely, perhaps bored, perhaps simply making a momentary lapse in judgment, answered one of those ads. The conversation seemed straightforward enough. He agreed to pay $75 for what he believed would be a sexual encounter. The arrangements were made, the location set, and Heath prepared to meet someone who he thought was a willing participant in a transaction. But, of course, the woman he was texting wasn't real. Behind the screen was an undercover officer, methodically building a case. When Heath showed up to the predetermined meeting spot, expecting one thing, the cops were waiting for something entirely different. The trap had been set, and he had walked directly into it. He was arrested on the spot, handcuffed and processed like any other suspect in a execution sting. But what made Heath's situation exponentially worse was that a local news crew was there, cameras rolling, capturing the whole humiliating scene. This wasn't just a quiet arrest that might have been handled discreetly. This was public, televised, and very embarrassing. His face, his name, and his shame were broadcast for everyone to see, including his teammates, coaches, and the organization that had invested in his future. The fallout was swift and devastating. The Atlanta Braves, an organization that prides itself on character and professionalism, suspended him indefinitely. There were no second chances, no opportunity to explain or make amends. Just like that, everything he had worked for since he was a kid, throwing baseballs in his backyard, was on the line. Years of training, sacrifice, and climbing through the minor league system, all of it suddenly seemed meaningless. Heath didn't have the luxury of a long, established career to fall back on. He hadn't made headlines from the mound or earned the kind of reputation that might have provided some protection. He was still building his legacy, still proving himself worthy of the big leagues. Instead of making his mark with strikeouts and wins, Juny Heath became just another cautionary tale, another name on the ever-growing list of players who threw it all away, chasing something that wasn't worth it. And so did this next player, Willson Contreras. Unlike the others on this list, this player didn't make headlines for anything he actually did with a porn star, but for who he tried to get the attention of online. Chicago Cubs catcher Willson Contreras didn't have a scandal involving a hotel room or some late-night party. No, his moment of fame came courtesy of retired adult film star Mia Khalifa and a few private messages that suddenly weren't so private anymore. Contreras, who has faced high-pressure moments at the plate in front of thousands, may have had his most awkward strikeout off the field when Mia Khalifa took to X, formerly Twitter, and shared screenshots showing that Contreras had been sending her DMs since early August. Now, for anyone not familiar with the platform, DMs are supposed to be private, but Khalifa made them very, very public. All it took was one tweet with a screenshot, and the internet did the rest. To make matters even more confusing, Contreras' camp claimed he was hacked. Boring, I must say. They could have come up with a better excuse. Don't get me wrong, the "I was hacked" may work once in a while, but this one didn't really hold up under scrutiny. According to Deadspin, who first ran with the story, the messages from Contreras started on August 4th, but just days later, on August 10th, he was tweeting tweeting normally about getting an MRI and wanting to get back to help his team. There were no signs that anything was wrong with the account. It was just business as usual. Plus, how would a hacker stay on a celebrity's account for days? And there was no public notice until after the pictures were leaked. So either this was the most patient, well-behaved hacker in the history of social media, or Contreras sent those messages himself. But then, again, nothing Contreras said was aggressive, offensive, or disrespectful. From what we saw, he was just trying. Maybe a little too hard, it was awkward, a little cringy, and definitely not subtle, but not something that would land him in hot water with the league. So, well, we can only hope that Contreras learned his lesson. Willie Mays Aikens. Willie Mays Aikens was once one of the most promising young hitters in Major League Baseball, but when his name comes up today, it's not his swing people talk about, it's the crack cocaine and the prison sentence.
And before that happened, I was incarcerated on a drug charge. In 1983, I became one of the first active Major League Baseball players, along with 3 of my teammates, to go to prison.
But it wasn't just drugs, there were prostitutes too, which is why Aikens is on this list. Aikens has openly admitted that during his playing days, he was smoking crack nearly every day and sleeping with prostitutes on a regular basis. His life off the field was chaotic, self-destructive, and completely at odds with the talent he showed between the lines. The sex, especially, became part of his story in a way most athletes never experience. He wasn't just a guy partying or caught in scandal, but he was a man unraveling in public, one choice at a time. And because of that, people stopped talking about the player he was or could have been. The conversation always circled back to the downfall, the drugs, the woman, and of course, the 20-year prison sentence that swallowed the rest of his career. But if you rewind the tape, before all that, you find something else. Aikens was a gifted kid from Bruce Hill, a small neighborhood in Seneca, South Carolina. Baseball was his escape. It was the one place where he had control, where he could shine. You could tell that it wasn't just a job for him, but a home too. And that's what makes his story so tragic and strange. A man who lost everything chasing temporary highs, when the one thing that could have saved him was the game he was born to play. Bolinsky. Bolinsky was basically the original bad boy pitcher before anyone knew what that meant. Long before the era of social media scandals and tabloid headlines, this guy was writing the playbook on how to be a baseball player who was more famous for his off-field antics than his on-field performance. Playing for the Los Angeles Angels in the 1960s, Bolinsky honestly seemed more interested in the glitz and glamour of Hollywood than the grinding daily work of professional baseball. The proximity to Tinseltown was like catnip to Bolinsky. While his teammates were focused on batting practice and studying opposing hitters, Bo was networking at studio parties and schmoozing with starlets. He understood something that many athletes of his era didn't. In Los Angeles, being seen with the right people could make you more famous than any batting average or ERA ever could. His most high-profile relationship was with Mamie Van Doren, and let me tell you, she was about as risque as it got back then. We're talking about the pre-internet era here, when Van Doren was one of the so-called 3Bs of blonde bombshells, alongside Brigitte Bardot and Jane Mansfield. Van Doren was doing these super provocative B-movies that pushed every boundary possible for the time. Films that were basically softcore entertainment dressed up with legitimate movie production values. Getting engaged to her was like announcing to the world that you were living life on the edge. But Bolinsky's taste in women didn't end there. He eventually married Jo Collins, who was a Playboy playmate, cementing his reputation as a man who clearly had a very specific type. The marriage to Collins showed that this wasn't just about publicity stunts or brief flings. Bolinsky was genuinely drawn to women who represented the emerging sexual revolution of the 1960s. His romantic portfolio didn't stop there either. He was also linked to Anne Margaret, the Swedish-American actress and singer who was setting hearts racing across America with her sultry performances, and Tina Louise, who became famous as the movie star Ginger on Gilligan's Island. Seriously, this dude was living every baseball player's fantasy, collecting relationships with some of the most desirable women in entertainment. The ironic thing about Bolinsky's Hollywood lifestyle was that he wasn't even that great of a pitcher. He threw a no-hitter against the Baltimore Orioles in May 1962, his rookie season, and everyone thought he'd be the next big thing in baseball. The performance was so dominant, so perfectly executed, that it seemed to herald the arrival of a new star. But instead of using that momentum to build a legendary career, Bolinsky was way too busy partying in Hollywood, attending premieres, and maintaining his status as baseball's most eligible bachelor. His love life was definitely more successful than his ERA ever was. The man knew how to pick them though. All these women were basically the adult entertainment icons of their era, just with classier packaging and mainstream appeal. Bolinsky proved that sometimes being memorable is more important than being great. If you enjoyed this video, click on any of the cards on your screen for more engaging content.